Hey. Welcome to episode number 120 of the Titanforge podcast. I'm Ratnos, joined by Tettles.
Yo, what up?
Yo. And Trell.
Yo, what up?
Yo. So this week we have some exciting stuff to discuss. Encrypted, the new Mythic Plus Affix, Tazavesh Mythic Plus are both things that have been getting tested. They tested a little bit recently, and we'll do some more testing over the next couple days. Encrypted came out about a day ago now, as the time recording this, so still pretty new. We'll explain how it all works and our thoughts on it. And then also, I guess we'll talk about Tazavesh M+, which feels sort of similar to when they released Mechagon and Karazhan and Seed of the Triumvirate and Cathedral, where it's just like, these things are hitting really hard.
Yes, very overtuned at the moment.
They need 10 consecutive patches worth of nerfs.
Yeah, well, I think it's just normal because, like, when they make a new dungeon, it's just they up the difficulty of it to match people having more gear and not being, like, fresh into the expansion. And so it's just, like, at a higher baseline.
Do you remember whenever they converted Mechagon to Mythic Plus, the M0 was, or, like, the plus 2 was, like, 4 times easier than the M0 version of Mechagon?
Yeah. I
wonder if they're going to do that again.
I think that kind of scaling is a good idea for it, or... I mean, the thing is, it's hard to know how much is, like, it's overtuned versus how much is we're not used to it, like we are used to the other dungeons mechanics. So that's going to be something
it is hard to tell at first. Although I did test it the other day once before this patch that came in yesterday, and it did feel like it was kind of just copy-pasted from what it was last patch as an M0 only dungeon. And then we scaled up to a 15, and it was hitting like a plus 20, I think, in my opinion, on average. But that's also like the first iteration of it at Mythic Plus, and they were asking for heavy feedback on it, so I would assume it's going to get a lot of changes here pretty quick.
Yeah, we don't get to yell at them for not testing it unless they announce the release date is like next week or the week after or something, which maybe, who knows when the patch is coming out. I bet we'll have a release date soon, but I don't know. I kind of want it as soon as possible, obviously, but I also would love to see, you know, some iteration on Encrypted and on Tazavesh. So, of course, the raid fights, making sure they're good. Of course, the last 3 bosses still haven't been tested in the raid, so that's a big question mark of if they've gotten them bug free enough that they're not going to have to test them, or if they need to pull the trigger on some testing of those bosses.
True, yeah. I wonder if they'll go to the last minute and do like. Do you think they would do like testing the week before the patch releases?
Usually, no.
I hope not.
There's just not enough time to like incorporate the testing stuff into the they usually have like a release candidate, and then they're just mopping up things before in the week or two before the patch comes out. So, I don't know. I mean, they could do whatever they want, of course. All right. We also have the exciting news or worrying news, or it's hard to interpret, hard to respond to, but that Microsoft is looking to buy Activision Blizzard, which I've seen a lot of, mostly just jokes is what I've seen about it, not so much actual.
Oh, they're big some good memes, like the classic Meadow background with the boars
yeah
all over it.
Yeah. I don't know. I don't really know how to feel about it. Like, I don't know. I usually don't like the idea of consolidating industries into massive mega corporations, but I also like the idea of some different people at the helm. So I'm torn. I guess I think cautiously optimistic.
Day-to-day users, this almost changes nothing.
Yeah.
Certainly.
Yeah, well, I mean, certainly not immediately. First of all, the deal hasn't gone through yet, and it requires approval first before it can. But yeah, it's the kind of thing where like the effect of this will be felt like 2 or 3 years down the line was when they'll start being felt, and then like 10 years down the line, some decision about whether to make a game or not will actually like matter for us. I don't know. Yeah,
I feel
like Microsoft.
if this was the first time they were required by someone, I would have been really worried. But since it's the second time and it's already too late to succumb to the corporate world, I feel like it's only a good thing just because the Activision situation has been bad for a while.
Yeah,
So, like,
Microsoft has
some
been.
changes-
It's been a good home for the games it's acquired in the past like 5-10 years. Like Minecraft, for instance, has got picked up and like only got better. Great updates to that game. So I think that's hopefully that's the road that it's going down here. But I don't know, too soon to tell. Hopefully all the employee demands and concerns get addressed and not just like hit the reset button on as well.
Yeah,
Those were concerns for my company. Those are concerns for another company.
Yeah, exactly. It's all fixed now. We've got a different person at the top. I don't know.
Can't fix the problem, sell it.
I do think that Bobby Kotick being not in charge is like a necessary step, which is not the case yet, but it's heavily implied that he's gonna not be in charge once the deal actually is finalized. So
If I had to put money on it, I would guess that he's almost certainly gone once this deal is finalized. They can't. I mean, they're not going to release him. I guess the bigger issue is like, is he going to take a place on Activision's board of directors post retirement? I guess is how I would say, because I mean that's the logical step for a CEO who's forced out, is typically they just take a place on the board of directors as like the head of the board, but he doesn't seem like. It doesn't seem from at least the outside looking in like he's very much wanted in the company at all, but the board may feel differently, right?
I don't know. If I talked about that, I'd just be making stuff up. So
Same.
yeah.
Wish I had any info on that one, but
Dude,
I mean,
side
even
note,
the employees were surprised by the
Yeah,
announcement.
they can't be told.
Yeah.
What is insider trading?
I mean, right, but still, it's like there's no way we could know any information if not any of the employees.
Yo, fuck it. Put WoW on Xbox Game Pass. I'm in.
Put WoW on the Xbox 360.
I'm not in. I'm not in. The Xbox 360?
Yeah.
That's been a console in like
Just that
15
one.
years, man.
None of the newer ones. All right, let's move on to talking about something that we wouldn't just be making stuff up about if we talked about it, which is the new seasonal affix, Encrypted. This affix, so it's just been testable for a day now, and I quite like it so far. So here's how it works. There's, throughout the dungeon, different mob packs, not all of them, maybe like a quarter of the mob packs, and every boss will have these 3 relics floating around them. The pointy relic, the squarey relic, and the circly relic. And then when you kill all 3 relics, an ad will spawn based on which relic you killed first. So if you kill the pointy relic first, you'll get this sniper ad. If you kill the squarey relic, you'll get this caster DPS ad. And if you kill the circly relic, you get a tank ad. And the relics have very little health. The ads that come out, the automa that come out, also don't have that much health. They don't do that much either. They don't give count, but they also don't. They all have like 0, 1, or maybe 2 abilities that are worth caring about. Which, like the tank one has a tank buster that increases all damage taken by 25%, so that is actually relevant for tanks for 5 seconds. A swirly that you have to move out of that is just aimed at the tank. And then the DPS one just has a cast that you interrupt once and then it dies, or maybe twice and then it dies.
And I think it's on like a 15 to 20 second CD, so that is solo kickable by a melee player.
And then the shooter one just shoots random targets and teleports away and makes like a Artificer Zymox line that you have to dodge, which is actually quite annoying. And it's the one that is, I think, the most annoying for DPS in terms of doing the mechanic, and also because it teleports away and it's like a rooted archer mob. It's also just the one that is the most annoying for damaging effectively. But none of them are really that bad. Even that one, like compared to tormented mini bosses or prideful mini bosses, these things are maybe 10% of the impact on a pull, maybe less.
Beguiling mini bosses.
Yeah,
How's
these
it
are
roll?
like
Oh.
less important than void emissaries. Less important. These are like an enchanted emissary level of annoyance or less. I don't know.
Okay.
Yeah, that's accurate. Like you can ignore the mobs most likely, even up to high key levels
Yeah,
until the end of the poll.
the main job that you're going to want to do is like you do want to choose the relic that you want to kill first based on which mob you want to fight. And the reason for that is less about what the mobs do actually than what they give you. So if you kill the circly tank relic, and once you kill the Automa, you get this 150% movement speed buff for 45 seconds and 10 seconds of stealth at the start of that as well. So that's actually a pretty you can use this as a shroud skip. Here's a little video of what that ends up looking like, right? You kill the Automa, and then bang, you've got speed and stealth, and you can make your way through most shroud skips pretty easily because you're just so fast. You're zooming.
This is like the return to speed pots, but on a 45-second duration instead of 8-second, which is really fun. I'm really glad to see they brought something like that back.
The speed being on a 45-second. Okay, so the stealth by itself, I think, is only on a 10-second duration. That speed being on a 45-second duration for 150% is absolutely absurd. And apparently, there's some relics that are like outside of the run in between Ardenweald. For stuff like that, it's absolutely like a great choice to pick the movement speed, and it makes a lot of sense for you to be able to like make that decision where it does make sense, and it's not just a cookie cutter. Oh, this one gives me the most damage. This is a solved decision. I'm always killing this one here.
Yeah. So that being said, I think for most people watching this or listening to this, you're gonna want to kill the square or the circle relics. The square gives you the haste buff in the end after everything is done, and the circle gives you the stealth / movement speed buff. I think almost every group will kill the square most of the time. Maybe at the very high end, we'll start seeing people kill the pointy relic for some cooldown reduction. And then I think there'll be a couple instances, like Tuttle said, where you take the movement speed from the circle relic.
I worry about the movement speed one because that one's the one that's associated with the tank buster, right?
Yeah, that
Yes.
one, like 25% damage taken is actually a big deal for a tank. Like that just negates your medium cooldown, like your Ardent Defender cooldown, Fort Brew, Demo Shout. You know, that just like removes that from your player.
And so like even though they have like a very little HP and they're like easy to just kill off, even if you get one of those, like if your tank gets hit with like one hit of that tank buster and they're taking 25% increased damage, that makes a lot of bosses potentially. But can you imagine like doing Moizala with a 25% increased damage dealt buff or something like that? Like it makes a lot of bosses a lot more dangerous, and then it makes subsequent trash pulls where that debuff is still up pretty spooky.
You only get it for 5 seconds. It's
okay.
Yeah.
So it's actually not even that big of a deal. And it's only like really scary on bosses.
The Automa dies pretty quick. I don't know. I think if you think about fighting bosses with physical, like 50% increased physical damage taken, which tanks often are just totally fine with, right? Like this is less bad than that and much lower uptime.
True.
So I don't think this is. I think the reason you won't do this on bosses is because you'd rather have haste than movement speed on a boss fight.
I'm worried. Honestly, the only thing I'm even worried about as a tank player is the magic damage instances where like the pack on the other side, if you were to fight the tank buster with one of those packs around the main ring, that's really scary for a tank because like any one of those casts could actually just one shot you. But on most bosses, it wouldn't be a big deal. Most of the time, it wouldn't be that big of a deal for just 5 seconds.
Yeah. So
I think assuming that the HP doesn't go like, I mean, the way that it's being tested right now, especially once you start getting like next tier's worth of gear and stuff like that, it looks like you're probably just going to crush those ads, assuming that they don't scale up too absurd past like the 20 keystone level. It does look like it's going to be fairly easy.
Yeah, relative to like an average mob in a pull, the relics themselves have like, I don't know, 2 or 5% of their health, and then the Automa, it feels like the Automa also have less health than the average mob in a pull, to the point that it's actually kind of awkward because if you want to get the shroud, you need the Automa to die last, and it's like it's hard to do that even if you're trying to. So I think that shows that these are really low health things compared to like a tormented mob, right, which has like 4 times the health of a regular dungeon mob.
Right.
So then What do you guys think this is going to do for the timer? Because you're getting a lot of beneficial buffs too.
Right, yeah. So you get these big hits of 20% increased haste for 45 seconds. You'll get one of these on every boss, right? If you just kill the square relic for each boss. It costs you one extra interrupt, and you can just cleave off of it otherwise, and you get 20% increased haste. So it probably saves you time on boss fights versus the affix not being there, which is usually affix is it's like the benefit eats away some of the time spent getting the benefit, but it doesn't overtake it. But here I think it will. Here I think the bosses will actually just be faster than they would be without this, especially because if you get a haste buff and then you pull the boss, you can then get the haste buff again like 20 seconds into the boss fight, and you can just they stack, like they'll overlap for the remaining duration of the first one, and you get, it's like Iron First style, you'll get 2 stacks of it for a bit. Yeah, so that can potentially be really nice. I think it's multiplicative as well. From at least it felt really powerful.
So then it's bugged and will remove once the first one expires.
No, it doesn't do that. They don't even stack on your raid frames. They're just 2 instances ticking at the same time, but it behaves exactly the same way as Iron First stacking does.
Gotcha. I mean, I think it's only going to increase the time, increase the speed of the run, not decrease it, is what I mean to say. But on some bosses, I don't know if it's possible to skip them on bosses, but depending on how much 2-target cleave you have in your comp passively, you may just want to avoid them on some bosses at the high end, because in like a very, very high key scenario, a second mob that's pulled with the mob that everyone's hitting sometimes will not even die during the boss if it's with certain comps.
I mean, yeah, they have very little health compared to like even trash mobs. So I think with most bosses, like unless you're pure single target comp, they will, I think, die to cleave. But yeah, so it is possible to. These relics are hostile. They do like pull. If you pull the pack, all 3 relics are gonna pull. But if you pull a relic, usually just like the pack pulls, and you can have some relics not proxy. And when they're next to bosses, they actually don't even proxy the boss unless they walk through the boss, it seems like. So I mean, I need to do some more testing to see if that's actually how it works. And I think that's the kind of thing that they might consider changing as well, so that they just always are hard tied to stuff. But if it's not like that, then yeah, you could like pull a boss and leave a relic for after or something. But that denies you quite a bit of space in the room, and it's really not that bad to just yeet yourself into the boss fight and start killing them, because they have so little health. Like it's so much easier than fighting bosses with Prideful or fighting bosses with Tormented. It's not even comparable.
It's true.
Before MDI teams pull the cubes to the side, pull the boss past the cubes, meld off the cubes, and then proceed to do the boss without the seasonal affix. What part is this? 10.
The thing is, like with the current tuning, I don't think that's worth like the time spent setting it up is the thing. Like that that's how low danger these things are compared to Tormented or Pride. It's not even in the same ballpark, which that's the reason I like this affix so much. It's such a nice refreshing break from adding 5 extra mobs that are all lethal threats to the dungeon.
I agree. Having it be not a huge impact on the challenge part of the affix is such a good thing, especially to see at the beginning of the season, because it could become a little bit harder and that'd be fine, or they could change it a little bit and not make it dreadful for the population to go through these affixes with. But like, I was just thinking about it, and even if the mob didn't die during the boss, you could just finish it right after the boss, and it would have had no effect on the boss fight, really. It wouldn't have killed the tank as long as you kicked the cast, assuming you pulled the haste guy, and then you would have the buff for the next pull, so that'd be totally fine.
Yeah, or you could do the movement speed one, and just after you kill some bosses, you have a nice long run afterwards, and zoom your way to the next pack, right? Kill a car, get a movement speed. Actually, with a car, you just probably want the haste, but to make the fight easier. But if you didn't, right, you could get the movement speed and save yourself. I mean, 150% movement speed in an indoor area. If you're getting most of those 45 seconds, that's saving you a minute. It's crazy.
Oh yeah, pulling this guy with a car, like you have the haste guy for the first half of the boss, and then you kill him, and then you have 20% haste plus less for the last like 40% of a car, so you can just burn and skip a whole shield. Maybe that'd be really, really good.
Yeah, I'm pretty excited about this affix. The one thing I don't like is right now, I don't think you'd ever want to kill the pointy one, because the pointy one is a more annoying mob. It's an archer. It teleports around. It makes people in your group dodge, whereas the square one just needs a kick, and then it doesn't do anything. And the square one gives you 20% increased haste. The pointy one gives you 25% increased spell and ability cooldown rate. But I think the haste is just going to be better for almost all specs, especially when you factor in the fact that like the specs that care the most about cooldown rate for rotational stuff, usually that will scale with haste as well. But so, you know, getting 25% increased cooldown rate for 45 seconds, that's like 11 seconds off of your major cooldown and your defensive, your utility stuff, your defensives and things. But I don't see that ever competing with the haste, even if it wasn't a more annoying mob to kill, which it is.
So is this just a numbers thing for you? Or do you think it's like a design issue? So if they bumped it up to 40% increased cooldown rate, would you be saying the same thing about the other relic?
Yeah, so there's definitely some number where it would flip over, and it would probably, you know, be somewhere where it would change for your group comp as well, right? Like if you're a group that likes the cooldown rate relatively or not. As it stands right now, I don't think there's even really any comps that would prefer the cooldown rate, but you could bump up the number to the point where it was, or you could bump it up. You know, if that thing was 100% increased cooldown recovery rate, you would just take that every time, right?
Oh yeah,
of course. Yeah, there's definitely a number where it's like, oh, yeah, well, it's always that.
The thing for me is that haste and cooldown rate feel so similar. Like those make your gameplay feel basically the same. Like it moves your gameplay in basically the same direction. Each of them do. So,
but haste affects more, honestly.
Yeah, it's slightly different. Like some specs, you know, it'll feel slightly different to have a bunch of haste versus a bunch of cooldown rate, but a lot of specs it'll feel exactly the same, or one will just feel like a slightly better version of the other, which I would rather see them change one of these effects to like a defensive one of some kind, maybe. Like, you know, could you imagine like a 30% DR that you could get for 45 seconds, right? Like something like that. You take that into last boss Plaguefall, right? And just like the first infectious rain is not a threat anymore, and that gives you a cooldown for that or something, or lets you set up some kind of big pull. I don't know.
Well, speaking of that boss in Plaguefall, I do think the CDR buff has a few niche purposes already in my mind. Like Swishy is saying in chat right now, the first boss of Mists, for example, if that allows you to cool down both down phases on that boss to burn it more effectively, then that's definitely better than haste. Or the last boss of Plaguefall, like we were just talking about, if it gives you a CD for all three phases at the start of the phase, that's huge. You know, that's a little bit better than haste, probably.
It's quite tough, though, because to get that to happen, you need your cooldown to not be up for something, but be like 11 seconds off or less. And you need to get 45 full seconds of this debuff to land in the period where that ability is cooling down. So that's a lot of hoops to jump through. I could see specific cases where it's like, oh, this specific class on this specific boss fight gets this benefit, but as of right now, I still just I don't know. I see this basically being dominated by the haste.
I agree. It's too many hoops to jump through, and like even coordinated groups, I feel like it'd be really hard to figure out some scenarios where you'd want to take that over haste. But maybe if they added some other attribute on top of it, like 10% more damage plus some CDR or something. I don't know what the right answer is to that.
I would just say that generally damage options are going to be more favored, even if you changed that CDR one to like a defensive option. I think that's probably better for at least like.
Well, I would change the haste one. I would change the easy to kill mob to be a more situational effect, and I would keep the best damage option to the sniper, because I think that would also create the like, hey, I'd like to kill an easier mob. You know, so I'll do that instead of the easier mob and the most damaging option being the same one.
Yeah, I'm definitely down to. Sure. I'm definitely down to access cooldown rate thing. I think that haste just generally makes more sense for a lot.
Yeah.
For most of the specs in the game, they can at least get some value out of the haste. Whereas like the CDR one, they're like the ineffable truth users from last expansion still.
So that's what I would do. I would move the haste to the Vi relic, and I would change the Woe relic into like a damage reduction plus mana recovery. Shield. Plus overshield, sure.
Fuck it, something.
You know, like whatever thing sounds cool and defensive, and then just like twice as much as that so that it actually competes with DPS 1. Twice as much as whatever sounds like a fair number to the developer initially. And then,
150% movement speed for 45 seconds, by the way.
That one is actually quite... I think that one doesn't necessarily need much changes. I do think that they could make the stealth a little bit less finicky. I think one thing that would be nice about it would be if you are in combat when you get the buff, you get the stealth as soon as you drop combat. Would be a really nice way so that you don't have to like really hard prioritize the damage on the Automa or off of the Automa, because it already requires some coordination to even get this Automa, right? You have to choose which relic you're going to kill and be careful and make sure you kill it instead of the other ones first. So I think that's the only change though I would make to the Shroud one.
I'm honestly down for 20 seconds as well.
10 seconds is like it's actually enough with the movement speed for almost all skips, but yeah, I'd be down for more, sure.
Well, a lot of the time, like, it would be uncoordinated groups. Yeah, I mean, uncoordinated groups are slow, dude. Like the Shroud, a lot of the time you're not just sitting there like, all right, as soon as this thing dies, run. Like if you're in voice, obviously you're saying these things, but like for a no voice group, you have to like coordinate it through chat and stuff like that. It's way easier, I think.
I'm down. Yeah, I think this one will need a little bit of help as well. So I'm down to give it the 20 seconds instead of 10 of the stealth.
Invis pots are dead.
I think it's just a really cool idea though, for the affix. I think another thing that they could think about doing is just adding some more like oomph to the whole thing. Like okay, imagine if once you've killed all 3 different Automa, you get some like small or medium-sized buff for the rest of the dungeon, and then you can get another stack of it if you kill all 3 again. That, and then that kind of puts some pressure on towards like not just always spamming the haste one, but you maybe still would if that's better.
What if they all gave you a version of their respective buffs, but like on a smaller scale if you killed them, but that smaller scale one was permanent, so like you get 5% haste for the rest of the dungeon if you kill the haste one, or 10% CDR if you kill the CDR one for the rest of the dungeon, and then you can just keep choosing options on top.
I worry that would increase you would just keep spamming the haste then at the end of the dungeon you just
right, in this situation, yeah, but I mean if they also tuned it to be more even on the choices. I saw a good tweet by Yoda saying maybe they should make the movement speed to some degree baseline if you kill any Automa, and then just make a third option instead. So you get movement speed plus something every single time.
I would axe the CDR one before I would axe the movement speed stealth one. I don't know if we necessarily need more movement speed baseline just from killing the relics. I mean, the movement speed in dungeons is incredibly underrated just as like a general thing to save you time. And a lot of players don't really notice it. They notice like big damage and killing bosses fast, but not frequently do they notice how much like a time save really clear and concise movement is. But like the 150% movement speed is a lot. I would definitely be looking at that CDR one is. It's just like it's competing versus the haste one is the biggest issue I have with it.
On the movement speed thing, like in Other Side alone, there's got to be at least 5 minutes of travel time in that dungeon, and speeding that up is quite the time save. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm pretty excited about this. One question we got in Discord from Taylor was, are we worried about this becoming sort of like Prideful Hakar, where you attempt a boss with the haste buff, and then you wipe, and then you don't have the haste buff for the next time you pull the boss, and so you're kind of like checkmated, like you sort of were against some bosses with Prideful. My initial impression is that it's not like impactful enough to be mandated. Like you can't kill this boss without 45 seconds of 20% haste, because that's way smaller than a pride buff, right?
Yeah, this is not nearly as impactful, and you don't get it on pull of the boss unless you set it up that way.
You can get a double stack though. You can like for certain bosses. Maybe I could see. The thing is, I don't think it's that. Because like those bosses, then you'd get the benefit of you don't have to fight an ad with it when you pull it. So like if it's really hard, that'll be nice.
Yeah. Haven't all those bosses been blasted straight into the ground where you don't... I don't feel like any bosses anymore have a checkmate position. And so unless they were going to go back through and rebuff bosses...
Yeah.
Which, I mean, fair play. Like, honestly, the dungeon, like we were talking about the dungeon timers being like probably a little bit too lenient for this upcoming season is what I would have to guess. Like fair play if they're going to rebuff bosses and stuff like that. I don't know if that's something that they would actually do. So like that's
No shot.
I could not imagine. I can't imagine them buffing dungeon timers or like buffing bosses. That would be crazy.
Yeah, the boss balance got to a much better state in this patch than it was in the first patch of this expansion. Like, I think we only got to the point in this patch where if you wiped it on a boss and lost less, you wouldn't be able to time the key. Only at the very, very highest level of key being done on like 28, 29. Honestly, like we could have, in a good comp, we could have run back and killed the boss without less and probably still timed it most of the time.
Yeah, it's definitely it's moving in that like Legion direction, right? Where it's like you actually have like it's just a question of can you do all the pulls, right? So I don't mind that. I think that I'm looking forward to this affix. Mostly, I'm just looking forward to doing a dungeon without Pridefuls in it and Incinerator Arclets in it, and like just these really nasty boss difficulty encounters all scattered through it, which I don't mind. Actually, don't mind those sorts of affixes, but it'll be nice to not have it for a season and to have these lower impact mobs. So. Yeah, even if they don't make much changes to it, I'm pretty down.
I agree, because at the end of the day, we're still getting a positive effect out of a very unimpactful affix in the long run. Like it used to be, you just got no positive benefit from the affix at all. You just had to deal with the emissary of tides and suffer through the pull, and then you got nothing from it.
Yeah,
pain.
Emissary of the tides gave count though. They gave 4 count. So that
four
was,
count
four
in the
count.
700 count dungeon. Yeah, thanks, bro.
No, they gave
what I was
9
really
count in that
hoping.
dungeon. Come on, have some
You're
respect,
right.
Tettles.
They did give 9 count in Shrine of the Storm, my favorite 700 count dungeon.
Yeah. Well, that dungeon, they just needed to increase the count in that dungeon because the eels were so small and the Tides Age Initiates, they had so little health but they still needed to be worth an amount of count. So they had to just multiply everything up.
You still had to kill just 100 mobs.
Yeah.
That's true. Yeah, I forgot about those eels. Those were dangerous little.
Yeah, especially when they didn't path to you, teleported through the floor, reset the whole pack,
Reset
the
the boss.
reset the boss, reset
During it.
during MDI, yeah.
Killed your MDI run. Made you lose to Echo multiple times.
Oof, that was Perplex.
Caused
Right?
the eventual downfall of Perplex to the point where they're considering breaking up for next season.
Dude, this is so sad.
Spiraling out of control.
One of the
Probably
things-
caused the Microsoft acquisition.
Holy shit! You got fucking cut right out slap again.
One other thing that's coming next patch is Keystone Hero achievement, which right now is being set for 3,000 rating, which is the equivalent of 2,400 in Season 2, because there's 2 extra dungeons next season. What could it possibly reward? What could it be? One thing that it almost certainly is one of the ways that you can get the conduit upgrade thing. So people were speculating that this was going to be for doing any of the dungeons at plus 20, but it's going to be 3,000 score or thereabouts for if you want to do this through M+, which I think is good, actually. It's good that you're not just like... If it were just do a 20 to get this item and get exalted, I don't know. The prices of plus 20 boost would be very lucrative. You'd make a lot of gold in like a month in the patch for doing 20 boosts, let me tell you.
Oh,
What
yeah.
is the equivalent of that going to be, like 25s and 26s, you think?
Yes.
What is 3K right now, Trell?
It's 2.4k
Oh.
of right now.
Oh.
IO. Yeah.
Yeah, that's
Okay.
like 23s, 24s,
Yeah.
22s maybe.
Something like that.
That's not bad. I think with the projected, like...
I think 20s.
Uh,
I think 20s get you there.
Is it just 20s?
Yeah, because 15s gets you 2k, right? And
Yeah.
it's like 80 points a
Okay,
level.
yeah, it's 20s. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
their purpose. Yeah.
So
okay, this makes sense.
it's which I think is about right for this achievement to land at. So
Not bad.
that should be pretty cool. Nice little way to get all your conduits, which has been a really frustrating thing in some of the previous patches. So love that. All right, let's move on to tip of the week. My tip of the week is if you want to buy a legendary pattern that comes from like Castle Nathria, and you don't want to do LFR, you don't want to do Castle Nathria, you can actually buy them with Anima if you have used your Anima Conductor 40 times, which is not actually 40 days anymore. If you upgrade that thing, you can get it. You can get it in like a week because you can just press all the locations every day now. So makes that a lot easier. And if you don't want to do LFR Nathria and you have a lot of Anima, that's the way to go.
I did not know that. Thank you, Jarvis.
It's a random memory though, so your mileage might vary.
You might get the maw rattle.
Yeah. Trell,
Make the maw rattle. It's legendary.
What is your tip of the week?
So since it's storming this week, I figured I'd throw in something about the Affix. If you ever notice like getting knocked back from a storming tornado, you get knocked back directly from the center of its current location on the field. So you can use it to get knocked into a second tornado mid-air, and you'll soak both, but not get knocked back a second time. And so you can actually soak 2 or 3 tornadoes in one knock if you're aiming properly. I do that a lot as a tank just to try to clear out some space for my melee players and healer and range players that are also in melee for some reason, but it can be good for sure.
Yeah, there's actually a lot of effects that behave that way. Like a lot of things that knock you backwards from where you're facing. So you can use that for a lot of things. As like obviously the one in the raid is like that too, right?
Ner'zhul, yeah,
Remnant and Ner'zhul. But basically anything that's not like sourced from a mob that is doing something to you will often, just back camera direction. All right, Tettles, let's take a look at your clip of the week, which again comes from old TTV Dratnos. This is where we get the double haste buff, right? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. I think that this is obviously very niche because like it involves some of the encrypted packs to be near like the boss that you're going to be pulling with the additional relics, or like it requires like 2 relic pulls to be like next to one another. But I think that just being able to kill this mini boss and refresh, or not refresh, but like double down on your buff or have 2 buffs active simultaneously is, while it is super niche, it can absolutely obliterate a boss, I feel like.
Yeah, I mean, just look at we're all doing so much extra damage and like abilities are just coming right off cooldown here with this like this. So yeah,
there's a lot of haste.
It is completely crazy.
I feel like that much haste is probably, you're getting a lot of diminishing returns, I think, on that much haste. But like,
well, I think the two buffs, it feels like the 2 buffs are like multiplicative with each other, which I think cancels out a lot of the DR, but I'm not 100% sure on that. Either way,
it doesn't work with stat DR. I mean, that's not how those buffs work. But
right, but it's just like the more haste you have, the less good haste is.
Exactly.
But if you're getting more haste, then that can cancel it out.
Yo, fuck it, lust again. I'm in.
Yeah, I think we have lust for this as well. We do, yeah. So
that's so
just
doomed.
Completely ascending here.
Yeah, because like once your GCD caps, like what is more?
Right, that's the thing is the GCD cap is certainly hit here for for a lot of people. I mean, I don't know. It looks pretty fun though.
100% haste is GCD cap.
We have a demonology warlock in this group that is doing some large numbers as a result of that.
Yeah, and Demo is one of the specs that can go through like the haste cap. Like, I mean, yeah, demonology warlock dots and stuff like other dot classes, stuff like that benefit more from haste. Not benefit more. They benefit more than other specs from haste past 100%. Not that they're necessarily good. You don't really want that much haste, but it is something that is not as bad for them.
Haste is also kind of bad for some classes with fixed GCDs like Monk and Rogue. I don't know if there's any other specs. Maybe Feral Druid?
A Feral, well...
Yeah, but like your GCDs don't increase with haste, and at a certain point, you don't need more energy regen, and that's all the haste gives you.
With Monk, it's actually like... It's like, if you get enough haste, it's like, man, I really wish I didn't have to press Fist of Fury so often so I could do my Rolling Dragon punches, right? Like,
yeah,
could this have a longer cooldown, please? Yeah.
Interesting. That might really affect the State of Windwalker dispatch.
Speaking of the state of things being affected by this patch, a huge amount of changes have come in here for healers. in the most recent build. Restoration Druid is getting big buffs. You can tell because if you've been following JB's Twitter, any random tweet from the last 20 tweets in the last 24 hours have been different forms of gloating on this one. gloating for the rest of Druids, and I think some deserved making fun of Holy Paladins who are getting hugely nerfed in this same update as well. But we'll save that for I guess after, because first off, the rest of Druid nerfs that are coming, or buffs that are coming in, are quite big. So just big coefficient buffs to Life Bloom and Aura buff from 0 to 10% for like almost all of their stuff is quite a lot there. Damage buffs to all their stuff as well there. Again, like 10% damage on all of their damagey abilities. And then Rejuve's durations increased on the Germination, if you talent Germination now. Inner Peace. While channeling Tranquility, you're immune to knockbacks and take 20% reduced damage, in addition to reducing the cooldown of it. Reduce mana costs on Overgrowth. Nourish, also 10% more healing or something. So a lot of stuff coming in for the rest of Druids.
Yeah, that's pretty good for Druid. I mean, a lot of things compound for Druids, because the more hots you have on a target, the more healing you do. And so having a 10% buff across the board is pretty big. Same thing with their damage. They have multiple dots out at all times if they have the GCDs for it, and that's going to compound quite a bit. I think it'll make a big difference, but I don't know if it'll make them like far and beyond better damage, at least, than other healers.
I think they're going to be very good for Mythic Plus. I suspect for Raid, I don't want to say it's going to be more of the same. I suspect for Raid it's going to be a similar situation. Resto Druid was already good in Raid. Like, to be perfectly clear, Resto Druid was already quite strong in Raid, and they were able to do things like solo healing, like Sylvanas platforms and shit like that. They were like doing stupid stuff already. Like if you gave them the opportunity, solo healing, Painsmith intermissions where your other healers didn't have to do anything, and like Resto Druid was already good at those kind of things. I suspect that this is just going to make them better at what they were before, while rounding them out a little bit more. And I don't want to say it's going to be more the same, but this doesn't necessarily change their niche more or less for Raid specifically. For Dungeons, though, this does look like an absolutely massive buff.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Yeah, I do think that it's like there's some diminishing returns to making the a throughput monster even more throughputty, because that's just not what I mean, to a certain extent, if you give them enough throughput, they'll be brought, and this might be enough, but it's still a case of the fundamentals really favor the damage reduction, the passive damage of certain other specs, one of which is Holy Paladin, which is getting some large nerfs. Avenging Wrath, there's kind of a stealth nerf to it, which is it's 20% crit instead of 30 now, because they took away one of the rank 2 buffs or something from it. They're also nerfing all of the damage for Holy Paladins of Judgment, Hammer of Wrath, Ashen Hallow, Hallowed Discernment by about 10%. Nerf to Holy Shock's coefficient. Nerf to Ashen Hallow's. So they nerfed Ashen Hallow's damage for Holy, and they nerfed its healing for everybody, is my understanding of how that's worked.
Good. Finally.
Yeah. But it's not that big nerfs to Ashen Hallow. It's still it's like a 10% nerf or something to those aspects of it, which I don't know. I mean, we've seen the 5% or 10% Ashen Hallow nerfs before, and it hasn't done anything. So, but the wings, the wings nerf that's not documented here, I think, is an important one.
Dude, I mean, Holy Paladin was already just terrible healing throughput. Actually criminally bad healing throughput. I suspect that I feel like you were kind of hinting on this, Dratnus. I don't think this is going to change much for when they should and shouldn't be brought. I think that maybe this is going to knock them down a peg in terms of the absolute maximum amount of damage that they can deal. But I still don't think Holy Paladin is necessarily they're still good for Ashen cooldown coverage whenever you need it. They're still good for Aura, Devo Aura Mastery cooldown coverage whenever you need it, specifically for Raid. I think that this does hurt them a lot for Mythic Plus, though. I think that because you have less other healers to rely on. And like you refer to them as throughput monsters. You don't have other throughput monsters to be able to carry your weak ass healing.
I agree with that, but I also think that at the higher end, once you figure out how to not need much healing in keys, HPAL is still going to be really good. Like they're still going to do a ton of damage with 10 to 12% less damage. They're still going to be a single target monster, but the progression of keys throughout the season to get to that point, they're going to have a really hard time. So the groups that can keep on with their old HPAL friends, they're going to have a good time later, but maybe not in the middle of the season.
That Resto Druid Kyrian legendary is actually just fucking
true.
broken, by the way.
Yeah.
That's why my stocks on Resto Druid are super high right now, is like that legendary is absolutely absurd. If it gets nerfed, we'll have to reassess. But that thing, I mean, I feel like Resto was already kind of competitive with Holy Paladin, especially on single target damage, just due to that legendary. And now with them getting a little bit hit on their damage and Resto Druid looking better, it's like, is this the safe and best option?
Yeah, I think that for balanced raid groups that were playing, a couple of throughput healers and like a Holy Paladin and a Disc Priest, I don't think this changes too much. Like I think that first Holy Paladin is still really valuable for raids.
Yeah.
But I do think that this might actually be enough to make the comps that were like 2 Holy Paladin, 2 Disc Priest, to make those comps actually run a throughput healer or 2, which is potentially exciting. I'm not 100% confident on that, but I do think that they are at least swinging at the right ball with these nerfs, which is something that is better than usually what they do for healers.
I'm of the opinion that if you're running like 2 or 3 Holy Paladins and you weren't in a World First guild, that shit is probably just worse than bringing a throughput healer that is able to keep your people alive during a dangerous part of the fight.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think good holy, like, I think that in
sure.
Even just random like top 100 guilds, top 200 guilds, whatever, like double Holy Paladin, as long as they were both good, I think it continued to be really valuable. And I think it'll still be fine to play 2 Holy Paladins for next year. I'm not sure it'll be the best anymore, which I think there's a good chance it will still be the best anymore, but I'm not sure anymore, which this will be the first tier in a long time that I'm not sure like 3 of your 4 healers should be Holy Paladins and Disc Priest, which is saying something. I would probably still put money on that versus not being like that, but it's close. It's close now.
Yeah.
Maybe we'll see both a Resto Druid and a Mistweaver in one kill.
And a Holy Priest as well. Holy Priest buffs. The Guardian Spirit has been changed in some way. I guess castable whilst... What even are the different
we can't
words
even, like,
here?
decipher what it means.
Preventing
I
target
don't know what
from
that means either.
sacrificing itself. Terminate restores. I actually don't even know that. It reads to me like it's the same words, but I know Jack was trying to make it do something that it didn't used to do before. So
Someone call Jack.
I don't know. Yeah. Also, just a nice little 10% buff to all healing and damage of all their abilities, and even more on some of these. I actually don't even know some of these. I guess it's like 10% healing and 20% damage. That's what it looks like for Holy Priest.
What do they have to do for Holy Priest to get people to bring this shit to raid?
Is
it just an issue of like all of the people who used to play Holy Priest play Disc? Is that actually the problem? Like,
yeah, well, so it is a strength of Holy that it's the same character that can play Disc, right? So you already saw Holy Priest just being used on various fights in Castle Nathrian and Sanctum because the priest would just play Holy for those throughputty fights. Increasing the throughput of the spec makes it obviously better, maybe competitive just on those merits alone. There's buffs here too.
Hope buff.
Yeah, Symbol of Hope. Well, it's hard to call this a buff actually. Oh yeah, it is a buff. It's cooldown reduction, and then it's the same rate but for a shorter time. But it's still more valuable, I guess, like this. And a new effect as well where you can cast Resurrection while in Spirit of Redemption. So if you're really quick to react when you die as a holy priest, I think even in combat you can B-res somebody basically. Was how it was working. I don't know if that'll make it to live, but
That's cool. I like that.
yeah, it's like it's a B-res that doesn't go against your B-res counter as well. But obviously the priest has to die at the end of their Spirit of Redemption, so it's
That's
a
interesting,
soul
though.
for a soul.
You could use that for a skip, for like a death skip.
Yeah,
That sounds
you could.
awful, but yeah, I haven't done a death skip in so long. I mean, I guess you could. When was the last time anybody did a
Not really
death
the play.
skip?
Oh, here's a new effect as well. Guardian Angel talent: when Guardian Spirit saves the target from death, it does not expire. So you could just like
Oh,
you could send like if you talented this for like Sylvanas, you could send somebody to go and pick up all of the pools and just have it every time they would tick and die, they just don't for for 10 seconds or whatever. So
well, then you also have the increased healing done to them that the GS applies.
yeah, I don't know. Cool effect.
It's interesting. It's cool to see.
Yeah, I like this trying to just add innovative new stuff for Holy Priest because I do feel like that's the sort of thing they need. I don't know if any of this does it, but I think it's great. I think it's again they're swinging at the right ball.
Well, I feel like the problem with Holy is not only the fact that they have disc right there, it's also that they have such a hard time dealing damage while healing, even more so than Druid or HPAL. Like I think Mistweaver Mistweaver the Fist Weaving build has a good time with that if it's viable. But I think other than that, Holy Priest is like the hardest one to damage while healing.
All right. Let's see. We also have some. Let's see. This tweet from WordUp I thought was pretty cool, which is all of the sources of the high item level weapons and the specs that are left without a chair when the music stopped here, which are Mistweaver, Windwalker, Holy Paladin, Rogues, and Enhancement Shamans. All do not have a max, like the extra half of a weapon tier jump available from the raid.
I take offense to this Windwalker one. They can wear a two-hander.
Okay, two-handers are
yeah. So that's the thing. Brewmaster being tagged as having one and Windwalker not being tagged as having one. They both have.
That's so disingenuous.
They both technically can use a two-hander, although the two-hander is scuffed for both of them to lesser or greater extent, depending on the situation.
It's awful. Like I was more trolling. Like,
yeah.
Oh yeah, Windwalker has a weapon.
I don't know. It's not that big of a deal, but this is certainly the kind of thing that might be an important tiebreaker for like, this is a couple percent nerf effectively for these specs once we're max geared. And in the interim, while you heroic Sylvanas weapons were good for a while, right? And that makes early mythic progress a lot easier, a lot better. So those specs also going to be bad for people that are like pinnacle heroic geared are going to be worse on these specs.
I mean, they do this shit every tier. I remember I got fucked in Nyalotha by the weapon being just like a wand or something, and I'm like, okay, cool, thanks. Glad you put a wand here that I can't use.
All right.
I don't know. It's stupid that I think it's like, dude, they should have just done weapon tokens again. I don't know. Well, I guess they don't have to do weapon tokens. They shouldn't tokenize all of our gear. Now that I'm really thinking about it, I haven't really put enough thought into it because I don't love tokens on everything. Because bring tier back as a token, bring weapon back as a tokens too. Put tokens on everything. F it. I don't really like that. I just think that there should be at least some parity, being able to obtain the highest item level of weapon stuff. Dratton's looking like he's itching.
I gotta go use the bathroom, but all right. You guys keep the show going. I'll be back in a couple minutes.
Yeah.
Nature calls.
But yeah, no. So I think the issue is just like there's no parity in the weapons. I don't think that it's like that big of a deal to not have tokens as a general rule. I think that the lack of tokens on tier is specifically problematic, though.
I agree with that. Going back to the Windwalker thing, though, the two-handers, I think it's a little bit better now. They're within 1% to 2% of each other, two-handers versus two one-handers. But at the beginning of Sanctum, I was wearing two 226 weapons from the previous tier on my Windwalker, and I looted a 236 two-hander, and I couldn't even use it on the first week because it was a downgrade over my 226s. So like
Okay.
if we're going off that scenario, this new having access to a higher eye level two-hander is like kind of pointless for monks in general, but I don't know. Maybe it's a little bit different now.
Ah, shit. I think we forgot to talk about this last week. Did we talk about the increased tier loot drops? Because I'm pretty sure we learned about that on Friday. How tier bosses drop 4 pieces of tier.
We might have mentioned it, but yeah, like, does that mean that they're going to drop a couple pieces of loot plus the tier? So like,
Yes. So it's
7
4
pieces of loot?
additional. Yes,
Or
and
8
it's
pieces of loot?
unknown. It's also unknown whether or not it works with like flex raid sizes. Like for heroic and normal, are you gonna have 30 people in there and you get 6 pieces of tier? That is a lot of loot. Like it has your guild talked about doing splits yet?
My guild just doesn't do splits. I don't. We're just a strictly one character guild. We just try to go for Hall of Fame on the one characters, and that's it. Are you guys gonna do splits?
Dude, that's a lot of tier. That is a lot of tier. We may be doing splits. We don't know yet. But like, holy shit.
I mean, it's definitely a good move. I respect that. Are you gonna play your hunter as your second character?
I would be playing my hunter. Yeah. The character that doesn't see any raid time unless we need a 10 immunities or something again. But it's like it's crazy how much that incentivizes doing splits even like on the second and like third weeks of the raid lockout, because so the tier bosses, I think there are only 3 tier bosses. It's either 2 or 3 tier bosses that are open the first week anyways. I think it's only 3. And then you get the rest of them after the first week whenever Rygalon, Lords of Dread, and the Jailer are all unlocked. And so like that is something that is incredibly important, is like doing the splits potentially even on the second week to be able to get that additional tier loot. We were talking about tier and how
I was listening the whole time.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Do you have anything to add? Did you wash your hands?
Nope. Yes.
Whoa, get back there. Okay.
Yeah, look, Harry, can you see them?
Don't touch that keyboard. Don't touch that keyboard.
Yeah. Yeah.
Don't show us your hands.
No, dude, you can see they're like.
Put your hands down. Put your hands down, creeper. Okay. Tier and splits.
Yeah, splits are going to be better than ever with this much tier, like bonus loot tier, not bonus, but on top of regular drops. Yeah.
I had to run through some situations in my head and started to.
Yeah,
like
252 normal tier. Pretty easy to get an alt that can trade that. Doesn't require any work once the patch comes out. Bang. 4 sets.
And then you have to like, so like, since you're not doing Rygalon, Lords of Dread, and Jailer after the patch, or like the first week, you can't even do those bosses. Like, what are you gonna do the second week? Do you immediately like you have somebody who goes and gets like a normal lockout for like just the tier bosses, because those are the only bosses you really care about on normal, except for like
you could even hold the lockout from the previous. You could even make the lockout the previous week with even worse alts.
But then you don't want to like you.
Like somebody like me that just has like 7 extra characters level 60, you could just hold lockouts all throughout the raid.
Yeah.
On.
Do you hold a lockout? Do like your do your heroic run, heroic progress through the last 3, then do your normal lockout for tier, splitting that, and then go do mythic? Is that really what we're gonna have to do? That's like the tier optimization route, right?
It depends. Yeah, it depends on which week you're trying to optimize tier for. Because again, I think another thing that alts will be really useful for is, like, say it's 4 weeks in, and you have some people that have 3-piece or 1-piece and need 2-piece or 4-piece, right? You can use alts to go and do like a normal run with 5 warriors that can trade to your 1 warrior that's on 3-piece, right? And you just quickly go in, do the bosses that drop tier that character needs, right? Try and trade it, and bang, there's a 10% damage increase, right, on that person.
Yeah.
Splits
for race rule first.
The race rule first splits are going to be worse than edge. Yeah, but even just like I would say most guilds in the top few hundred have either decided to or seriously considered an additional character on top of what they normally do, which is, rough.
Normal.
Yeah, we were talking about with Greg last week about playing like week 2 of the patch with World First Raiders and Mythic Plus as a tank who hasn't done Mythic Raid at all. And, like, imagine this patch, you walk into a key with a week 2 World First Raider and they just have full 4 set.
You got no tier pieces, yeah.
275 item level or something, and they're just like doing 5 times your damage as the tank. And you're just like, okay, well, I'm not getting threat.
The funny thing is, like, I don't even care about this for like race to world first competitors. They're always going to do dumb cringe stuff. It's just like, man, this is incentivized for
if Tettles' guild is thinking about do it, like Tettles' Boomer Guild that
Boomer Guild is doing normal splits.
If Tettles' Boomer Guild is going to have alts doing something, that's usually how you know something's wrong. Although Tettles' Boomer Guild, they are a little bit more degen than they let on. They do the whole, we never overtime stuff, but they've been caught in the raid outside of their
radars.
And then
that's true.
Yeah, and we have people who don't sleep except for during the daytime. We have a lot of night owls in our degen guild.
Nice. Yeah. Been there. All right. Let's get to a couple Q&A questions, but first, we get to thank our wonderful supporters over at the Patreon. They are Paul. My Rafflecopter has entered the server. Schwa, schwa, schwa. Overtime season is coming to an end soon, TM. Maybe I can finally play WoW again. Ja, Dratnos' Dino Pillow, Chromed, Trekkie, Tettles Catfisher, Chewy, Buff All Spells, Empowering Druids, aka Based, Microvision Blizzard, just right. It's not AMZ, it's AMZ, Salty Senny, Necris, Tankdill, Nevuk, Breadceratops, Sinmora, Eevee, Survival Main, No Trick, I Scheduled a Tettles Flame, Dimat, Bluefur, Nyx, Fire, and Frost, and Arcane. Oh my. Gallic, Brusif, Dratnoshots Abyss, Shard of D's Nuts, that is, Sanity, Xena, Rogue is now good enough for Prague, still bad enough to be sat for SLG, bless up. Red Color, youtube.com/workbringer, KOZ's Mythic Team is Trash Cans and not Trash Cants, Alphabet Soup, Druid Friends of Evolved Gaming, number 1 Simpsky for Trelsky, Lurka leveling another Shaman as his alt is the most Lurka thing to date. I got flamed for not interrupting an Arathi base in Comstomp. Comstomp next week, by the way, if anybody needs a little hit of renown or just wants to do some Comstomp for fun. Next week coming soon. Mark your calendars.
I'm so tired. I am so tired.
You got some of that blood of the enemy farm.
Milk. Soji is the number 1 little green man on US Thrall. Word around the Mage Tower is Trell has fantastic eyeballs and is now 3k. Sifei, Pone, Windwalker Monks deal with nerfs by rolling with the punches. Argent Dawn EU, Goldshire regular. Praise Ian, creator of the systems, and Wonder. Thanks all for the support. Q&A time. Our first question comes from Gamble in Discord, who says, one of the most common complaints between M+ and raid gearing is that M+ is spammable, while raid is not. What's your stance on removing the weekly lockout on raid or introducing one to M+?
Ooh. I mean, I don't think there's a world where you could remove the lockout of raid, right? Like, that would just...
Yeah.
There's no way.
I mean, that's the reason that it's the highest item level loot you can get.
Right, so that's the state of the game right now is, like, raid gear is better, but you can only roll it at once a week. M+ gear is, like, you can just farm it. You can do 50 Theater of Pains and get your ruby, right? But it's a couple item levels lower.
It's 6 item levels lower, which, I mean...
Yeah. I don't know. I do think that, like, there's sort of an M+ weekly lockout gear, right? Which is the Great Vault, right? Doing your first M+ of each week gives you a one piece of raid gear, and then you can only get that once per week. I think it's reasonably good right now. Like, I would like to see maybe a little bit more power in the M+ row of the Great Vault somehow. A little bit more of a way to gear up that way, but I think it's in a pretty reasonable state right now. The whole thing.
It's at a spot where, like, I kind of wish that you could be a little bit more rewarded for doing keys at the absolute top end, because that honestly is kind of equitable to raid, but, like, it shouldn't be spammable. Yeah. Like that's the egregious part, is like I think that there is something that is wrong with the loot from Mythic Plus, and like gearing as a Mythic Plus only player. But at the same time, like as somebody who also does raid, I don't think it should be just like open season. And specifically, I don't think that raid should lack an instance lock for loot. I don't think that you should. I think there's too much loot in the game generally, so I think that adding more doesn't make sense to me.
I mean, you also can't put a lock on Mythic Plus runs per week, because that's also the equivalent of making it so you can only PvP 5 times a week. Like that's the only spammable thing outside of raid to do in the game for the players that want to play at the highest level they can besides raiding.
Hey man, do you want to do some keys? No, I'm already locked. Hey man,
locked.
do you want to come do the other side key? No, I gotta use all my lock this week on theater pains.
My raid
sorry.
Group. My raid group is carrying me through three of
that's true.
Pains later.
That's the thing, right? Yeah, if they made it like locked, but it was higher item level from plus 20, plus 20s aren't that hard. Like you can, if you have good M plussers in your guild and bad M plussers in your guild, the good M plussers can throw the bad M plussers on their backs and bring them through a plus 20 for gear.
Oh yeah.
Painfully for all parties, but it could and would be done if there was an incentive to do it, which is why I'm very glad there isn't. All right, our next question comes from Tree Nuts, who asks, any advice for experimenting with routing and high keys on non-meta tanks? Potentially bricking Pug's keys so I can experiment with what is/isn't livable feels mean, and the limited time I can play with a set group feels wasted trying new stuff out that may just be worse than perfecting the suboptimal route, presumably that they already know. Trail, what's your take on this? I think also an interesting topic is just like what's an off-meta tank this season, right? Like, and how does that affect the routing compared to some seasons where there's like really far in the woods off-meta, and is that a different experience?
Well, Trina specifically, I know is playing Brew, and so I think that's where he's coming from with Brew, because if he doesn't have the Aegis trinket, then some of these pulls he is probably going to die on, like we talked about. But I'd say Warrior is kind of in that boat too. But it's hard to make these decisions too, because in any given different pug group, the players can be any range of skill level, and also different specs that you would not normally see in a streamer's group, because they probably play with the same group most of the time. So you don't know exactly what's going to happen when you pull something for the first time or experiment. So usually, like, if I were in that boat, I would have a couple different options, see how the run's going, and then when I get to that point, I would make it the decision right then and be like, okay, I think it's worth the risk. They can probably do this. I'll go ahead and try it. And only if I feel like I have extra time too. So if it goes wrong, then there's like a backup and you can still time it.
I think that, yeah, if like developing some flexibility is a really valuable thing, but it is really hard to, adjust on the fly as a tank, especially because like you get to the like you need to make sure it all still adds up to 100 and everything at the end. But if you can do that, and if you can answer the question, like, what is the timer looking like? Do I need to go with something aggressive, or do I just need to make sure we don't wipe, right? Like, are we far enough ahead that it's just don't wipe territory? And that will definitely help you time keys in the short term. In the long term, yeah, experimenting with dangerous pulls is, an important way to get better. But if you've got limited time and you don't want to brick a pug's key, I understand being scared of doing that in a high key.
Yeah,
I'm gonna be real. I would just blast the pug ski. Like I would be down. Like, here's the thing. I did the MDI with this guy. Like, this guy, if he's just in a pug, like, let's be real for a second. This guy is better than 99.9% of like pug tanks that you're gonna get. If you're gonna deplete the key, it's probably not because of some like pull that he was trying to test out. Like, almost certainly is not because of some pull that he was trying to test out. And so, like, it's also a pug, and you never really know what you're going to get. But this guy is going to be able to carry your group. This is going to be super, super stupid. I'm probably going to get some backlash for this again.
Oh, I'm sure. I'm sure it's already
people
been
hate whenever
typed out.
Yeah. I think that, like, honest to God, you brick the pug's key. If it happens, it happens. Don't like try to brick their key. That's cringe. But like, if it happens, it's like not even that big of a deal. There's a reason that it's a pug. Right? There's a reason that it's a low coordinated group. And if you think it's doable and it's going to save you a lot of time, and it's something that you want/need to test, it is totally acceptable to do it in a pug's key. You could also go on the TR if you wanted to just test one pull specifically. I know that this guy has like TR or P. You can even go on the PTR if you want to as well. I wouldn't necessarily waste the time that I have with the set group. That doesn't make much sense, at least in the context. Like if these are the two options, I'm bricking the Pugs key 100% of the time over wasting my time with the set group.
I don't know. I think that doing like hard pulls, coordination pulls with a set group is like the upside is better there because maybe then you actually like figure it out as a group versus with a pug, right? It's like, are you really learning anything where it's like, oh yeah, this pull's really hard. Do I have pugs that can do it or not, right? Whereas with your set group, trying hard pulls, like they learn that you're playing with them in the future again as well.
But it's a livability check, not necessarily a coordination check. If you're trying to if you're trying to coordination check your group, then that's probably going to be doomed, right? If you're pulling like, what's a bunch of casters? If you're pulling like the whole hallway in DOS or something like that, yeah, you're gonna wipe. Like it's just gonna wipe your group. And while it is a doable pull with a bunch of hoodoo hexers and stuff, it's dangerous for no reason. Whereas like if it's just like some triple pull and mists or something like that, and he's just trying to see like how to gather it up, and it's like a really doable pull with just one staghorn. But it's just like a lot of mobs, and he's just trying to livable check it to see like how he can get that pull set up as a brewmaster monk and stuff like that. I think that's totally fine.
Yeah, I think
if someone dies to threat, I think in that situation, someone might die to threat while he's gathering, and that's totally okay. I think the whole point Telus is making is to be okay with the failure if that's a possibility, which it probably will be a possibility.
You got to fail somewhere,
right? I mean, if you're a good tank, right, and you're doing a good job, right, and like, you know, the group wipes and you were doing a hard pull, but you know, it's not like you screwed up as the tank. Like, yeah, it is. I think not really. It's not. I think the tanks have like this weight of the world on them of like everything was my fault, and you know, to some extent that's true, right? To some extent, most wipes could be avoided by the tank just being even more good. But yeah, I don't know. I think one thing you could do is just like you can ask the pug, like, "Hey, do you guys mind if I pull all three of the packs in this spot?" Right? And oftentimes they'll either be like, "Yes," in which case, bang, ethical dilemma solved, or somebody else. Sometimes you get in these pugs and like just of the four other people in the group, somebody has like a weird pull they like that they can teach you, and so that's I think like a good way of going about it. But I don't know, a lot of times you'll just ask something like that and nobody will reply in your pug, and then like you're just like, what, you know, what's happening here? I don't know.
I think asking them is also valid. I would just send it, but like I understand why. Like maybe you care about the ethics a little bit more of pug group dilemmas.
Yeah, like from the pug's perspective, like they're just lucky to have a tank. You know, they're just glad you're there.
They're lucky to have a tank of this guy's caliber. Like that's how I view it too. Is like they are lucky to have a tank that, like a guy that has participated in the MDI and can play at an insanely high skill level.
And on that note, that's going to be the end of Titanforge 120, but Titanforge 121 will be back even better next week. Same day as the Path of Exile League announcement. Very exciting news. So we won't talk about that next week, but maybe we will.
What about the classic Season of Mastery?
Oh yeah, what's happening with you put something about classic Season of Mastery in the show notes. What happened there?
I don't know. It happened.
Okay.
Just snuck it in.
Tettles put the World of Warcraft Classic Season of Mastery results as part of the topic for this week.
I was scrolling through Wowhead and they said something about Classic Season of Mastery. I just added it randomly.
Okay. All right. Well,
don't worry about it.
I'm sure they're still having a great time over there playing Season of Mastery.
The results are in.
We'll be back next week to talk about Season of Mastery, Path of Exile, and Lost Ark, and Microsoft PowerPoint. Later, everybody.
Later.